Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Career Talks. And I'm so excited for today because we have such a great guest. She's one of my favorite top voices. She is an executive resume writer and a certified personal brand strategist, Jessica Hernandez. Welcome, Jessica.
Hey, Andrew, I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited to be talking about LinkedIn and job search again with you, one of my favorite topics.
Of course, yes, and you're one of my favorite people to talk about this with. We've known each other virtually, I think, for like four or 5 years now, I
Oh,
think.
it's been a while, yeah.
But Jessica, we're here today to talk about how people can get noticed after they apply for a job. And obviously, that's so important. But I also want to talk about the actual process of applying for a job. Do you have any tips for that process? Because it's so important.
It really is. And the very first tip that I try to give job seekers is to apply early. And I say that because so many people will apply, qualified and not, for jobs. Just recently, I had actually posted a job on LinkedIn, and within an hour, I had already received over 100 applications. And I'm just one person, and I run a small business, so I know large companies are getting hundreds more candidates and applications in such a short period of time. And there's just no way for hiring managers and recruiters to be able to go through the hundreds and hundreds of applicants that they receive. So the earlier you apply, the more likely your application is to be viewed by the hiring manager. The second thing that I would say, even before you submit the application, is making sure that you use the specific job title at the top of your resume. And the reason why you want to do this is because it creates clarity and it communicates to the hiring manager, yes, I'm applying for this specific position. I'm qualified for this specific position. That way there's no guessing. You're connecting the dots for them and it makes their job so much easier. And then adding on to that, the third tip is to make sure that in your cover letter, you're stating why you're a fit for the job. And what you really want to do is, again, connect the dots for the hiring manager. Let them know what past experience you have that's relevant to the requirements of this specific role. And the more you can clearly lay that out for them, the more they're going to see the connection between who you are, what you do, and that you're a fit for that job.
Definitely. And I can't endorse what you said at the start, which is apply early. I can't endorse that enough because, people, even though this may not feel like it if you're a job seeker, companies, they want the hiring process to be fast. So most recruiters, most companies, they're going to start looking at applications as soon as they start coming in. So the sooner you get your application in, the quicker it's going to get to the top, the quicker it's going to get some eyeballs on it. So I completely endorse that.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing I'm going to mention is that there's a new feature on LinkedIn actually where basically you can note that you are this is a top job for you.
Yeah.
This is, I believe, part of our premium subscription service. But basically, what you could do is say, "Hey, this is one of my top choice jobs. I'm really interested." And what's nice is that on the end of the company, so the recruiter or whoever is viewing it, they will be notified that this is actually a top choice for you. So that's something else you could do to stand out too when you are in the application process.
Yeah, it's a really great way to show them that you're genuinely interested in the role. I know when I was recently doing hiring, there's a cute little badge that gets put on the application, and it's like, hey, this person said that, this job was their top choice. And I thought, oh, let me, look at their application and let me read through it, because if it's that important to them, then I want to take the time to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially it usually means that they spend a little bit more time on it, they're a little bit more invested in it, so
Yeah.
it's a good signal that you could say, like, "Listen, this is something that I'm taking really seriously, and I'm really interested in your company." And now, obviously, there are people on the other side of this process, so you're a person that you apply for a job, then there are recruiters, there are hiring managers, and we're gonna be talking about hiring managers a little bit today, but can you tell us the difference between really what a recruiter is and what a hiring manager is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way I know to explain it is that the recruiter is at the beginning of the job search process. So they're the one that's sourcing for candidates. They're the ones that are screening candidates, setting up interviews, doing initial pre-screening. for the hiring manager, who is ultimately the person that makes the hiring decision. So they would be the one sitting in on the interview and saying, yes or no, we want this person to be a part of our team. And it varies. So in a smaller company, the person who's also doing the sourcing and screening might also be a part of the hiring team or might be the hiring manager. In a larger company, you won't see that. They'll have their own recruiting team. They'll have recruiters specifically getting candidates in the door, getting them set up for interviews. And then you have your hiring manager that will actually say, hey, I'm the supervisor or the head of the department. I want you on my team. And they make the offer.
That's great. And, obviously, I think there are a lot of people who they sometimes get the two confused, or they think the recruiter is going to be making the decision. The recruiter is more like a tour guide almost, where they're
Yeah.
sort of saying, "Hey, listen, it's great that you're interested. Let me show you around. I'll take you through the process." They'll also be sort of going through the resumes at first. But I guess, obviously the hiring manager is what we call the D. They're the decision maker when it comes to who's actually going to be hired. So how do you find out who that person is? Because obviously, like, I work for LinkedIn, we're a big company. So I imagine finding the hiring manager can be a little bit of a challenge, right?
Right, it can be. And so there are a couple of different ways you can do it. The first way, and the absolute easiest way, is a premium feature that LinkedIn has, and it's called Meet the Hiring Team. And so if you have LinkedIn Premium, you go to the actual job posting, so whatever that job is that you want to apply to, and then on that job posting, you're going to see it's up on the screen right now. You'll navigate to the job description page, and then there's going to be this little box that says Meet the Hiring Team. And so this allows you to message the person that actually posted the job. So this is the job poster. And so for some companies, this might be the recruiter. For other companies, it might be the department head, or what we would call the decision maker or the hiring manager. But either way, this gives you access to the actual job poster. So it's an awesome LinkedIn premium feature. And then LinkedIn has actually taken it a step further. So when you click the message button, LinkedIn will offer you an AI generated template to message the hiring manager. And so I would just say, think of that messaging template as a starting point. You don't want to actually send the hiring manager word for word what that template says, because there's probably a dozen or more other people that are just clicking send and sending them that, and that defeats the purpose of standing out. So you definitely want to make sure that you're customizing your message when you reach out, letting them know that you applied and why you applied. But that's the easiest way to find the hiring manager. Another way that you can find the hiring manager is to go to the company's page on LinkedIn and look at their people tab, because you can see who the employees of that company are. And then you would look for anyone in human resources and recruiting if you were trying to reach the recruiter. And then you would look for the actual job title of the person that would be above you, above the position that you're targeting, if you're looking for the hiring manager. And I always recommend people make more than one connection at a company if and when possible. So those are two easy ways to do it. And then the third way, you have to do a little sleuthing, but you can go to the LinkedIn search bar. And this is how I did it for my husband. When he tried to transition out of entrepreneurship into nonprofit, he wanted to work for the YMCA, which is a huge organization and has branches all over the place. And so I went to the LinkedIn search bar and I typed in YMCA and I typed in HR and I looked at who came up. And then I narrowed it down by location. So I looked for people that were here in Florida, in the area where we live. And I narrowed it down even further. I started looking to see, okay, well, who's in human resources in Florida at the YMCA. And so I just kept narrowing it down further and further. And then I would go to their profile and see what kind of activity they had. Are they active on LinkedIn? And lo and behold, the HR VP had posted the job that my husband wanted to apply to. So I knew, okay, here's my hiring manager, here's my decision maker. And so we reached out to her and she responded and he got an interview. And now I teach those strategies to all of my course students and my clients. But those are three ways that you can use to find the hiring manager, whether you have premium or whether you're running searches on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, there's a fourth method, which is basically use your network, ask around. So maybe you know someone who works in that company or works in that industry. It's a kind of a light lift to say, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about this position and maybe who the hiring manager is?" And in a lot of cases, what I'll always tell people is if you know someone at that company and you're writing a cover letter or something like that, you always want to make it personal. So don't try and avoid saying to whom it may concern or dear whoever, at the top of it. So just asking, hey, who's the hiring manager can go a long way, especially if you know someone at that company or even someone in that industry. They may know a little bit about the landscape. So that's a fourth fourth way. And then Jessica, there's so much noise and competition for jobs, especially now. We know that January is a really big month for job seekers. People, they do New Year's resolutions, but they also do New Year, new job, new you.
Yeah.
So beyond just your application, how can you get in front of the hiring manager? How can you grab their attention and maybe not be annoying about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think that fear actually of being annoying or being too aggressive is what keeps job seekers from messaging hiring managers. I've noticed, just over the last 15 years of being in the industry and being a hiring manager myself, very few people will actually message the hiring manager or the recruiter to let them know that they applied for the job, that they're interested, and why they think they're a fit. Even I know I referenced it before, but this last time that I was looking to hire someone and I was using LinkedIn, I got 15 messages from job seekers, which is like the most I've ever had out of the hundreds of people that applied. And then 12 of them used the AI generated template, and three of them customized it. And those three people I actually called up and interviewed because I was so impressed that they took the time to customize the message and tell me why they were interested and why their skills and their experience was a fit. And so I always tell job seekers my number one tip to get the attention of the hiring manager after you've applied is to message them, to let them know that you've applied for the job and why you are a fit for the job. So again, it goes back to connecting those dots for the hiring manager. You have to let them know, okay, here's the relevant experience I have, and here's how it fits. And it works for small companies and large companies. The one thing I would say is don't be discouraged if they don't respond, because most of the research and the studies that I've read will tell you you're only going to get a 20 to 40% response rate. So not every hiring manager or recruiter is going to respond to you, but you don't need every single one of them to respond to you. You just need one or two of them to respond to you and to move on to the interview stage. And so that's the first way. The second way is to message your connections within the hiring organization. So you were just talking about letting your connections know, asking them who they know in the organization. So if you've already built up those connections in your network, you already have a couple of people that work at one of your target companies, send them a message, let them know, hey, I applied to this job, submitted my application, I messaged the hiring manager, do you have any tips or advice for me? Or I just wanted to let you know that I submitted my application in case you've already discussed with them about sending a referral or writing a referral for you.
All great pieces of advice, and especially like you said that they may not respond, but also something to keep in mind too is that hiring managers, they may not know sort of the proper protocol, because some
Mhm.
companies, especially if they're large, they may have very specific instructions on how to deal with resumes, with applications and stuff like that. So even if you want to, when I was in high school, the teachers always said, do something outlandish or really do a really graphic resume and get it in front of the hiring manager. But a lot of companies, they just don't work like that. So a hiring manager might just say, ooh, I don't know if I'm supposed to respond to them or if I should pass them off to the recruiter. But it doesn't mean that your messages aren't being read.
Yeah.
So even if they don't respond, it might still get you in front of a pair of eyeballs a little bit faster. So even if, like I said, you don't get that actual response, it may still be an effective message. They may just not know how to respond. And also, just a quick reminder to all of you out there that we are seeing your questions and we're saving them up for the end of the show. So make sure they keep coming in. So we'll take those in just a little bit. Um, And then, Jessica, what are some other ways that job seekers can stand out to hiring managers? Because obviously, you can send messages, you can do all of that, but what other ways can they actually say, "Hey, I'm a great candidate. You should really consider me."
Okay, so this has to be my absolute favorite part of talking about LinkedIn, but it's all the secret little strategies and settings behind the scenes that you don't realize are there and accessible to you. So I would say, first and foremost, go to your settings on LinkedIn and go to the job seeking preferences setting, because there's a couple of things in there that are really awesome that you probably don't know are there. But the first one is you can turn on signaling interest for job alerts. So let me explain that a little bit more. Let's say LinkedIn is one of my target companies, like they're at the top of my list and I really want to work for them. So I go and I turn on a job alert for LinkedIn. So anytime LinkedIn posts a job that's related to a specific role, then LinkedIn would alert me and say, hey, they have posted a job. Well, I can turn on this feature that says signal interest. And so that tells LinkedIn and the recruiter that's using the LinkedIn program to recruit and find candidates and stuff, it tells them, hey, this candidate has job alerts turned on for you. They're really interested in your company. So it puts this spotlight on my application when I apply that lets the recruiter know I'm more likely to respond if they reach out to me about an opportunity. So that's the first one. And that's actually in your job seeking preference settings on LinkedIn. The other one that's right there in the same space that you can turn on is called share your resume with all recruiters. And so it's just a little toggle on off button. You toggle it on and basically it makes your resumes that you've uploaded to LinkedIn searchable to recruiters. So all of those great skills and experiences that are on your resume are now searchable when a recruiter does a search on LinkedIn, not just your profile, but your actual resume. And so those are two. The third one is you can turn on or click the I'm interested button, and we can actually show you where that is on a company page. Not all companies have this feature turned on yet. I think that they were telling me about 40% of companies have this turned on. So check your target company list. Go to their company page on LinkedIn. You're going to see under the About tab, scroll down a little bit, you'll see a section that says interested in working with us in the future. And then you click the I'm interested button. And that sends a little signal to recruiters, to the recruiters on the back end, letting them know, hey, Josh or Jessica or Andrew, they're interested in working with this company. Again, it signals to the recruiter, hey, this person really is interested. They're going to respond if I reach out to them. Another signal or spotlight that you can do to bring attention to yourself and get noticed by recruiters is to engage with their company content on LinkedIn. It sets off a signal called engaged with brand, which means, again, it spotlights your profile to recruiters to let them know that you're actively joining conversations with that company on LinkedIn. You're commenting on their posts, you're liking their posts, you're interacting with their ads that they've put on LinkedIn. All of these things combined together to, again, alert the recruiter, hey, this person is really interested in this company, which helps you stand out compared to all of the other applicants. There's another spotlight called active talent. And so if you've recently updated your LinkedIn profile, if you have recently been in a layoff, if you've recently turned on the feature to share your resume with all recruiters, these are little signals that tell LinkedIn, hey, you're actively looking for a job, which adds another spotlight to your profile. It's another indication to recruiters that you're a candidate that's actively looking for employment. There's a couple of other ways that you can spotlight yourself and your profile to really get you noticed with your recruiters before and after you've applied to the job. You can build and strengthen connections within the company. I tell my clients all the time, you need to have 3 to 5 connections within each of your target companies, because LinkedIn is going to put a little highlight on your application that's going to say, hey, this person has company connections. Well, we all know that employee referral is the number one way that companies hire and bring in new talent and that these employee referrals actually have greater longevity and are happier in their job. And so this is another way to say, hey, I'm well connected in the organization. I'm more likely to respond if you reach out to me about an opportunity. And then the last strategy you can do is to turn on your open to features on your profile. So LinkedIn offers you a couple of options. You can turn on behind the scenes settings that let recruiters know that you're open to connections, the type of roles that you're looking for, whether you want remote work, hybrid, full-time, contract work, the exact job titles that you're looking for. These are all ways to communicate to recruiters, hey, here's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm open to these opportunities. And then you can also add the green banner. And I don't know about you, Andrew, but I have had and have heard a lot of questions and controversy over the green banner and whether to put it up or not, whether it makes you look desperate or, like needy, or it's a red flag. And I tell people all the time, put it up, because you're 40% more likely to be contacted by a recruiter if you have the green banner on. And that number, that data, that comes straight from LinkedIn. I didn't just, make that up. That's your own information, that's saying, hey, this is good for you.
Yeah, and that question does come up periodically, and so for everyone watching out there, so the part of LinkedIn I'm in, I'm not a LinkedIn pitch person or anything like that. I'm on the editorial team. So when that feature, the green banner, was released in 2020, I believe it was, or maybe early 2021 during the pandemic, I was getting so many questions about that. And we went to our product team and said, okay, but can we show this is actually helpful or is it harmful? Yeah. And the data that they found, and they continue obviously to do these to make sure that there are benefits to the feature, was that there was a 40% increase in the number of messages from recruiters. And also, I believe it was a 25% increase in the number of messages from people within their network. So the idea was that, recruiters are seeing this and saying, hey, you're looking for a job. I have one available that you might be a good fit for. And then obviously there is people within your own network who see it and say, hey, I didn't know you were looking, things like that. The thing we can't say is that it will get you a job, because those are obviously statistics that we don't necessarily have, and we can't necessarily say the green banner is what got you a job, because let's face it, you're the one who has to get yourself a job. But so far it is a net positive. So that's what the research shows. So hopefully the people on the call, we could put that to rest there. And then also, everything you described, Jessica, is basically something that, in fact, I was just looking at it today. There is another side to LinkedIn. So all the things that Jessica was talking about is basically features in something called LinkedIn Recruiter. And that is where employers go to find talent. So all of those signals, all of those little buttons that you choose will light up on the side of the recruiter. So they could go in and say, okay, of all these applicants, who is the top choice, or like who said that this job is their top choice, who's most interested in the company. And it really shows them who's invested in the company, and they could sort of get to a more granular level. But that's how all of those signals get translated for an employer. And then before I get to my next question, I just want to remind everyone, keep getting your questions in. And I think I saw Lisa saying that she would love to rewatch this at some point. So don't worry, this is all being recorded. So once we are done with today's show, you can go back and rewatch it, because I know Jessica has so many wonderful tips. So don't worry, you'll be able to watch this all again. But Jessica, obviously we talked about reaching out to the hiring manager, but, just more broadly, how do you follow up with people in your job search? Because, obviously it's something that's top of mind for you as a job seeker, but it may not be top of mind to other people. So you want to keep them in the loop. You want to keep them engaged. What are your best practices for that?
Yeah, I love that question. I hear a lot of people say, how much follow-up is too much follow-up? They don't want to aggravate or annoy or come off as desperate or anything like that. So what you don't want to do is message the hiring manager every 3 days and say, I'm checking on the status of my application. Hi, it's me again. I'm checking in. We don't want to do that. We want to make every follow-up an opportunity to connect dots for the hiring manager and to point out, like, hey, I'm really excited about this role because I see that you value this, or you value that. Well, I value that. And I'll give you a really good example. I was working with a job seeker that really valued community involvement. And it was like one of his main core values. And so when he was applying to different jobs, he really had this one company that was top of mind. They were big into community building. And so he used that as an opportunity in his follow up. So he messaged them after he applied and he said, one of the things that has drawn me to this company is that you value building community. And I do as well. In the past, I've, coached at the local schools. I've volunteered with the local food pantry. I've, been a part of all these initiatives to help build and strengthen my community. And so he connected the dots for them between one of his values and one of their values in his follow-up. And that led to interviews for him. And so what I would say is, message the hiring manager after you apply for the job. Make that connection of relevant skills and experiences. If you don't hear back a week later, you can follow up, but don't just say, hey, I'm checking on my application. Reach out, reiterate your interest and your excitement in the role, and let them know why. Talk about a value that you both hold in common. This helps for them to envision why you're a fit for that role. And then if, let's say, you get an interview, follow up after the interview. Thank them for the interview, but then also reiterate something from the interview that stood out to you, something that you appreciated, something that you're excited about or looking forward to. Connect that to a relevant experience or a relevant value that you hold that's a fit for the organization. And then if you haven't heard anything within a week, follow up again and just reiterate that excitement and again, make a connection. Now, obviously this doesn't need to go on forever and ever and ever. So if you haven't heard anything after that first week of follow up and you wait one more week and then you follow up again and you don't hear anything, feel free to keep pursuing other opportunities, keep going on other interviews. Obviously, don't stop your interviewing by any means. Keep going in your job search. But I would say at that point, if you've already followed up 2 or 3 times, it's okay to just leave it and not keep following up. And then let's say, a month or 2 down the road, if, you're still job searching or you just really, really loved that company, like it was one of your top 5 target companies, feel free to check in with them and say, hey, it's been a month since we talked. And I was, I'm really excited about the conversation that we had a month ago. And then, just follow up with them, see if there's anything else has opened up or if they can keep you in mind for future opportunities, and then just let it go. And then I would also say, follow up with your network connection. So if you've had an informational meeting with somebody, check in with them periodically, once a week or every other week, to let them know how your job search is progressing. And then also follow up with them when you're getting ready to apply to an opportunity that they've discussed with you. So let's say I've had an informational meeting with somebody that works at LinkedIn. I want to work there. So we've talked, we've made connections, and I see a job and I'm about to apply. I might message that connection and say, hey, Andrew, I know that, we met and talked 2 weeks ago and I expressed my interest in this position with LinkedIn. I saw they have an opening and I'm about to apply. Do you have any suggestions for me, or do you have any recommendations or any advice? I'm not asking him for a referral because sometimes that makes people uncomfortable, but I am asking them for their advice and their recommendations. And so they might offer the referral. Oh yeah, I know who's hiring for that role. Let me pass them along your resume and your name. So there are other ways that you can follow up with different people. So whether it's the hiring manager or the recruiter, or it's a connection in your network, as long as you're not messaging them like every day or every 3 days or every week for 6 months, then you're not annoying them by any means. It's okay to follow up, and it's okay to do that more than once.
Yeah, and those are all great pieces of advice, and especially I want to double down on what you said when it comes to really not falling in love with the job until you have it. So you could be interested, you can have, a bunch of connections there, but nothing is ever guaranteed. Obviously there are so many variables in the hiring process. The hiring manager's cousin could have thrown their hat in the ring. You just don't know. So don't fall in love with the job until you're actually hired and have that offer letter, because like anything can happen. Always keep job searching. And then the other thing I would say too, on top of all of that, is that job searching is something, unfortunately, that pretty much we're all going to have to do at several points in our life.
Yeah.
So play the long game. If it's a company that you're really interested in, even if they reject you, even if they say after the third, fourth, or fifth interview, hey, we're going in another direction, it doesn't mean the door is closed forever. Because I've had people in my life that have stayed in touch. And I don't know about you, Jessica, but for me, someone sort of pops up every once in a while, maybe, once every 6 months or so, and say, hey, do you want to do a Zoom, or do you want to get coffee? I'll be in your neighborhood. You just become familiar with that person. And then the next time a position opens up, or you are looking for another job, then you have that built-in connection. And the chances are, they're more willing to help you and in a position to help you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a really great point. And we tend to think about networking like it's a little icky, but I don't think of it that way. I think of it as supporting and encouraging other people. So just like you said, getting together, having those periodic Zoom calls or coffee meetings or coffee chats, it's playing the long game. You're not necessarily trying to get anything for yourself. You're also giving, you're supporting, you're building relationship that, who knows, you might be able to help that person later on down the line, or they might be able to help you.
Totally. And, before we get to our member questions and everyone who's watching, my last question for you is, what other advice do you have for job seekers? Obviously, you have so much advice. I know, because I know you. But, what are your top tips to really, excel in your job search, stand out? What could they be doing to increase their effectiveness in their job search?
Yeah, it's so hard to narrow it down. You're right. I just want to give all the good advice and all the good strategies. But the one thing I would really say, and I teach this to my students, is you have to engage. You have to be a part of the conversations that are happening on LinkedIn all the time. And I see so many job seekers that just scroll. They hop on LinkedIn and they kind of scroll through the feed and they see what's up there and what's going on, but they're not commenting and joining conversations, and they're not posting content. And I'm not saying go out there and be a creator, but I am saying join the conversations that are already happening with your connections on LinkedIn and in your industry. And so that means you need to comment thoughtfully and you need to comment insightfully. So let's say there's another career expert in my industry and they're offering advice to job seekers, or they're talking about a common problem that job seekers might face. I'm not going to go on their post and just say, great post, I love it, or thanks for sharing. I'm going to hop on that post and I'm going to say, here's what I've found when I've worked with job seekers. Here's what I found that works. Or, this is what helped me. I did XYZ, or I had success doing this, that, or the other. And so what you want to do is hop on and comment on experts in your industry. LinkedIn has a lot of different top voice lists, and these are people in your industry in sales and marketing, in human resources, in digital and tech. And, they have all kinds of lists of trustworthy voices that are in your industry that are talking about things that are going on right now. And you can join that conversation and you can add your thoughts and your insights. And I've had dozens of my clients and my students that have done this and have gotten job offers from it, like lots and lots of interviews and job offers just pouring in from them, just engaging in conversations, offering their insight, their experience, the types of results or tips or strategies. And then also just start posting on LinkedIn, even if it's to say, I'm open to work, here's what I'm looking for. Or on LinkedIn's homepage, they run news stories on the right-hand side of the page. Find something that resonates with you, that is applicable to your industry, and join the conversation. Add to the news story, share the news story, so that people start becoming familiar with your name. They start seeing your name on LinkedIn more, and you build that familiarity, you build that relationship, you strengthen that relationship, and then you become the go-to person when they hear about an opportunity or they hear about a role or a recruiter sees it. So for example, if someone's connected to me and they comment on my post, all of my other connections can see that. So if they're on their LinkedIn feed, they can see other people that have commented on my post. Well, I'm connected with thousands of recruiters. And so let's say, I'm talking about something that's going on in the logistics industry or the transportation industry, and you're a logistics expert and you comment on it. Well, all the recruiters that are in my network that I'm connected with now, they can see your comments and they can see you. And you've got the nice little green banner up, and guess who they're going to message and want to talk to about opportunities. So there's so much more that you can do other than just applying to the job or just messaging the hiring manager. It's also about being active on the platform, which increases your visibility, which means more recruiters are going to see you, more hiring managers in your industry are going to see you. And that's where you start getting a lot more messages from them saying, hey, I saw your background, I saw your profile. Would you be interested in talking about this position or that position, or coming in for an interview or meeting for coffee?
Yeah, those are all great pieces of advice, and I know it's going to help a lot of people in the comments that I think a lot of them said that they weren't sure what to write about, and especially as a member of the LinkedIn news team, I appreciate you shouting out the news stories that are on the right side of LinkedIn.com. Those are
Yeah.
put together by an incredible team of journalists all around the world in your local region, so always be sure to check those out. But we have so many questions that have come in, so we'll take those. And again, just as a reminder, once we're done with the show, at this link, you can refresh it and it'll start replaying again. So you could save this link, you could go back to your events page on LinkedIn, and this will be there for as long as LinkedIn is. So you could keep checking back and relive all of Jessica's wonderful tips. But Jessica, we have so many questions about cover letters.
Oh my
And I know that may seem off topic, but I think it's incredibly on topic, because basically what we're talking about is sending cover letters. Because I think everyone out there, they think that a cover letter is a piece of paper that goes on top of a resume, or it's an added attachment, but really it's just a message to the employer. So when you reach out to the hiring manager or someone like that, that is in effect your cover letter, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So it's your message to the hiring manager, whether it's on a piece of paper attached to your resume, or whether it's in an email that you send to the hiring manager or the recruiter, or whether it's in that message that you're sending when you message the hiring team from the job posting. And so that's where you want to make the connection of fit. That's where you want to talk about, here's how my experience relates to the role and the requirements of the role. And that's where you want to connect the dots for the hiring manager. So, no matter what avenue or method you're using to communicate, that's essentially it. It's the same thing.
Yeah. And also, when you send that email or something like that, so when people ask, should they send a cover letter or add to it, it's really the same as sending a message. You're not sure if it's going to be read, but it's sort of a value add, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I hear people all the time that'll say, do I still need a cover letter? Yes, absolutely. Not every person may read it, but if half of them are reading it and it adds value to them, and they're saying, oh, this person would really be a fit here, or I really want to talk to them to find out more about this. And there are a lot of executives, I don't think a lot of job seekers realize this, but there's a lot of executives that base their decision on who to interview based on what's in the cover letter. And a lot of people don't realize that. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but there are actual research studies that say, hey, 49% of recruiters are saying they're basing their hiring decision, or executives, I'm sorry, are basing their hiring decision or their decision of who to interview on what you say in your cover letter.
Yeah. And again, no single piece of the hiring process or any of those things are going to get you hired. It's really a culmination of everything.
Yeah.
But, those little tiny things can make a difference because they add up. So,
Yes.
Marcio, Andrew, let's see here, Tim, Merla, I hope that answered all of your cover letter questions. I'm sure there are more in here, but hopefully that helped. And then, we have a great one from Jason, and this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, which is, do you have any tips for applying early? So how do you get notified as soon as a job is posted, or do you just have to kind of sit there and hope you catch it?
Oh gosh, no. Turn on a job alert. So if you're on LinkedIn, just turn on the job alert for the company so that anytime a certain position comes up at one of your target companies or that job title is posted on LinkedIn anywhere, you're going to get a notification from LinkedIn that says, hey, LinkedIn just posted a position for a content manager or for a news editor or for, whatever. It will alert you and tell you, and then you can go in and apply. And you're like the first, as soon as it's posted, you're the first person notified. Like it immediately, as soon as a job is posted, immediate notification goes out to any job seekers that have a job alert set up for that job title or for that company. And so you don't have to go and sit and scroll for hours and hours and hours and look at job postings. Just set up the job alerts. LinkedIn will notify you. And as soon as they notify you, you can submit your application and you'll be one of the first people that gets in.
Yeah, and you'd also, I think you could set them like how often you want to receive
Yes.
them. So if you don't want an alert popping up on your phone or in your email like every 5 minutes, you could do it at the end of the day or something like that.
Yep.
So there's a lot of customizable stuff. And then we have a few good questions here about whether it's appropriate to actually reach out to a hiring manager or the recruiter. Which I think goes back to the idea that some hiring managers, they may not feel comfortable
Mhm.
responding to applicants. So, Scott wants to know how appropriate it is to reach out directly to the hiring manager. And then we have, let's see here, we have someone else asking if they should reach out to HR, the recruiter first.
Okay. So I would be working both angles. If this is like one of your top 5 or 10 target companies, I would do both. And it's not really like an either or, it's a both situation. So you can be in conversations with the recruiter, and at the same time, you can be reaching out and connecting with the hiring manager and facilitating a conversation with them. And your results will vary. So some hiring managers, like Andrew was saying before, some hiring managers might just send your message to the recruiter and say, hey, I want to talk to this person. Can you set up an interview or whatever? Some of them love that you took the initiative and you reached out to them, and they'll respond directly to you and say, I'm going to pass this on to HR. We'll set up an interview, or yeah, I'd love to chat. Let's schedule, a telephone call for tomorrow or whatever. And I would say the sky's the limit. I was talking earlier about, my husband's job search. He reached out to the vice president of HR at the Y. He reached out to the president of the Y for Florida. The guy responded. He like accepted his LinkedIn invitation and connected with him and passed along his information. And a lot of people kind of balk at that. They're like, oh, like, don't you think that's a little excessive? No, it works. It works. And it's not going to work for everybody. Not every hiring manager or decision maker or executive level person is going to respond or apply, but some will. And they will take the opportunity to connect with you. And so I say do both.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And Mario said, "What is an appropriate message to the hiring manager?" And what I would say is also, and obviously, I would love your thoughts after that. Is it doesn't have to be saying like, "Hey, I want to interview," or "I want X, Y, and Z." To the hiring manager, it could just be, "Hey, I'm really excited for this job. I think I'm a great fit." You can go over sort of all those main points, why you would be perfect for the role, how you could solve their problems, and just say, "I really look forward to hearing from your company." And that might just be enough to get them to ask the recruiter, "Hey, what's this person's resume look like?"
Yeah.
So Jessica, what do you think?
Yeah. So here's the thing. In a perfect world, you would already be building the relationship with those decision makers and hiring managers before you apply to the job. But that doesn't always work out. Sometimes we get laid off and we haven't had an opportunity to be working on our networking. Or sometimes we see a job from a company that we didn't know existed before. And now we're like, oh, this is great. This sounds exactly like what I would want to do. So, in a perfect world, you're already starting to facilitate those connections and relationships with hiring managers. You're connecting with them. You're following their content on LinkedIn. You're commenting on their content on LinkedIn, or you're sending them a message and asking for an informational meeting. But if that's not the case, then exactly like you were talking about, you send them a message to let them know that you applied to the opportunity, why you believe you're a good fit, and why you're excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And then we have a few questions here about the actual follow-up. So how long after, various points. So if you send the application, how long should you wait to follow up if you haven't heard back? I assume that should be almost as soon as possible, right?
Right. So I would message them right after you apply and I would let them know, like, hey, I applied. I'm really excited about this role. Here's why. Here's, how I'm a fit, and not a whole life story. Hiring managers are busy. So keep it short. But then if you haven't heard back from them in a week or two, go ahead and follow up again and just say, I'm still really excited about this opportunity. I'd love the opportunity to speak with you. I saw in the job posting that one of the requirements is that you have project management experience. And I'm doing that currently with XYZ company. I am, running a budget for however much for, this company. I'd love to be able to talk about it more with you in an interview. So you're finding different little tidbits of things that you can connect the dots when you're following up with them. But yeah, it's completely feasible to follow up right after you apply and then again in a week.
Right. And now that question was from George. And now we have a similar question from Rochelle. And she wants to know how long after the final interview and thank you email should you wait to follow up on a job to hear news?
Ooh, good question. I would wait a week. So standard, you wait a week, you follow. If you've already sent them a thank you email, I would give them a week, unless in the interview they have told you something different. So normally at the end of the interview, you want to ask, what are the next steps from here? When do you expect to make a decision? When should I expect to hear something along those lines? And so if they have already told you, like, we're interviewing over the next 2 weeks and then we hope to make a decision, then follow up then. If they're saying, oh, we hope to make a decision in the next 3 days, then you can follow up around that 4 or 5 day mark and just say, I was checking in. I know it was important to you to make a decision within 3 days. I'm really excited. I'd love to hear more and what you've decided.
Yeah, and also I know during our chat I saw a comment and question from Michelle that was asking, do you think after you're rejected you'll be able to actually chat with the hiring manager or recruiter? And my take on that is probably not. But there are some companies that do make a habit of, if you've been sort of a finalist, they will say, hey, we want to give you some feedback on the hiring process, and those companies are incredible. There aren't many of them. But Jessica, what are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. So, in a perfect world, again, every company would tell the interviewees, like, hey, we decided to go in a different direction, but, here's why. I just wanted to give you feedback. It wasn't that you weren't, great for the role. It was just that this other candidate had more experience in this one specific area that was really important to us and that we really needed. So, we decided to go for them. But we think you're great. And, I'd like to keep you in mind for future opportunities, or I know of something over here. You can always ask for feedback. And I would be, specific. Like, was there anything in my candidacy that concerned you? Or was there a specific skill that I could be working on that would have made me a stronger candidate, or something along those lines? You're asking for something very specific, because hiring managers and recruiters are really hesitant to give feedback because it can be perceived negatively. And they always err on the side of caution. Now, I will say that in my experience, I try to give feedback to candidates, especially those that I've interviewed, and let them know, if I decided to go with a different candidate, why. And everything I've ever heard from the candidates that I've interviewed has been, thank you so much for the kindness. Thank you so much for letting me know. I mean, just an outpouring of gratitude. And so I really wish that more recruiters and hiring managers would make a habit of, even just giving a job seeker a little bit of information, like, we loved our interview with you. We thought you were great. We decided to go with this other candidate because they had stronger sales experience, or, they had a little bit more of this and that was going to be a better fit for the role. And it just really helps job seekers feel better about the process, and for it not to be so demoralizing or frustrating or challenging. And it can be really heartbreaking to go through 7 rounds of interviews with a company that you're dreaming about working for, and then at the end of it, they don't choose you. That's really hard. So it's okay to ask, absolutely. But I would just, be specific about how you ask. Like, is there something that I can do or develop that would help me in future interviews or with other companies? So,
Yeah, and if you hear from anyone, I think like you said, you're probably going to hear from the HR person or the recruiter because companies are very careful about how they say they turned you down for a job because
mhm,
it might open themselves up to legal liability.
yep,
Because especially in the U.S., I can't speak for outside the U.S., but here they're very cautious about ageism,
yeah,
discrimination, and basically, you can ask someone how old they are in an interview, but you can't use that information against them. So, someone on the other side of the hiring process will be very careful on how they structure, how they say they turned you down, things like that. So,
mhm,
that's why there's probably little chance of getting that feedback. But if you do get it, it's probably going to be from the HR or recruiter. And then also the biggest caveat of all this is if you ask, be prepared for the answer and don't get defensive.
yes.
And now, Jessica, the next question we have two of these that I think are really good, which are about pivoting. So we have one from Haley, and then let's see here. We have one from Yusuf, which is basically how can you stand out when you're applying for a job in an industry that you're new to?
Right. So I've mentioned many times today about connecting the dots for hiring managers, and you want to do the same thing when you're applying for a job that you don't have experience in. So you want to find those translatable, those transferable hard skills and soft skills that you possess, and you want to connect the dots for the hiring manager of how those align and relate to the target job. And even I would encourage you to call out the elephant in the room and say, while I don't have direct experience in this area, I do have experience in this area, which very closely aligns with whatever that area is that you may not have direct experience in. So, no matter what you do, you're going back and you're connecting the dots and you're tying your past experience to the requirements of the role. That way, the hiring manager can see the connection. And so, whether you're using a hard skill or whether you're using a soft skill to tie that in, you want to give an example.
That's great. And now, we don't have a ton of time left, but we have a few questions here that I would be remiss if we didn't talk about applicant tracking systems, which is everyone's favorite topic. So, a quick just overview of applicant tracking systems are basically ATSs, and if you've ever applied for a job anywhere, you're dealing with an applicant tracking system because basically it's just a computer system that ingests information, and then the recruiter and the employer can work on the back end to sort that information, to sort of look at candidates. But there are a lot of them and they're all very different. Some have different capabilities. The capabilities depend on the subscription the employer basically purchases.
Yes.
But in most cases, a recruiter will eventually look at your resume. Even if it's not one of the first ones, they will likely look at it. So, you can make sure that you are going to be putting your keywords in, all the important information. But at the end of the day, you still want to be writing your resume, your cover letter, everything for the human on the other side. Because if you write it for a computer, the computer is not making the hiring decision. What are your thoughts, Jessica?
Yeah, you have exactly nailed it. The computer is not making the hiring decision. It's just parsing the information so that the recruiters can view the resumes and see them. And it might, some of them might be scoring the application depending on how it's working. But if you're including the hard skills for the role, which is basically what keywords are, they're the technical, professional, and academic skills that you possess. If you're putting the ones that are relevant to that job in your resume, then recruiters are going to see your resume. I mean, they can see anybody who's applied for the job. They'll be able to look through all the applications regardless. But if they're running a search to see, which skill a particular job seeker has or which of the resumes possess that skill, then you want to make sure that those are on your resume, that they're on your LinkedIn profile. So I know if I'm on LinkedIn and I run a search for a project manager, then whoever has that listed on their profile and is in my network is going to come up in my search results. And so it's very similar with applicant tracking systems. You want to make sure that you have those skills, hard skills, listed on your resume. And, like I said, professional, technical, and academic. Those are the types of skills and keywords that recruiters and hiring managers are going to use to pull up resumes, to search through their candidate databases, and to make decisions on who to call and who to interview. And so, I would tell job seekers that applicant tracking systems, they aren't this big bad mystery that you have to like battle to get through that's preventing you from being seen by a recruiter or a hiring manager. They're like a database of information that recruiters can search through. Kind of like if you go to Google and you run a search, I can go to an applicant tracking system and I can search for a candidate that's applied for the job based on whatever my search parameters are. And, like you said, Andrew, they don't all work that way, but that's the typical gist.
Yeah, and also, I know there are so many people out there that are basically saying, "But I got an immediate rejection when
Yeah.
I applied." And so this is what I will say is that basically those are called knockout questions, and that's why when you're applying for a job, you have to read all of the questions very carefully, all of the instructions, because basically what will happen is the hiring manager will tell the recruiter, okay, these are the minimum qualifications. This is what a person will need to be considered for this job. So when it says like, are you, have this specific certification, this, and this, and you hit no, what it will then do is basically say, okay, this person will not even be considered for this job because the hiring manager wants to make sure this person has that certification. And
Mhm.
that will trigger probably an automatic rejection. So make sure you read all of the instructions very carefully. So hopefully that clears it up. And then one last question, Jessica. Someone asked, and I can't find the question right now, resumes, 2 or 3 pages.
That depends on your experience. So I would say if you are an executive level job seeker and you've got 20 plus years of experience and you need 3 pages to tell your entire career story, then 3 pages it is. But most people can tell their story impactfully and concisely in 2 pages, but there is no hard or fast rule that says your resume is going to get kicked out or I'm not going to interview you if it's 3 pages instead of 2 pages or vice versa.
Totally correct. And now my next question is actually for everyone who is out there watching. And basically, we're going to put a QR code on the screen. Unless you're watching this on your phone, then we're also going to put a URL there. And we want to hear your thoughts on today. So tell us what you thought of today's show, maybe what topics you'd like us to tackle on the next episode, because we do this for you. We want to make sure that we're being super helpful, that we're helping you get ahead in your job search, in your career. So like I said, go to that LinkedIn link there at the bottom, or take your phone and hold it up to that QR code, and it'll open up a survey. Tell us what you think, because we love to hear your responses. We love to hear what you want us to cover in future editions, and, obviously reach out. And then for all of you out there who are thinking, hey, what can I post about? Reshare this broadcast. You can do that. You tag Jessica and myself. We'd love to see what your thoughts are, your responses, maybe the top 3 things that you learned. And, Jessica, actually, before we go, where can people find more about you and find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. So my LinkedIn URL is available. I think they're going to put that up on the screen. And then the website where you can go and find more information about the tools and resources that I have available for job seekers. I'm really excited about a brand new tool that I just developed that's launching today. It's called Job Seeker Central. It's a membership platform that I created for job seekers that has resume writing course, cover letter writing course. It has networking scripts, messaging scripts for hiring managers. I have contact lists for recruiters on there. I really wanted to create a career library resource for job seekers that had everything they'd need for their job search. So it's there, and everyone who has attended today's career talk can get 50% off if they go to the URL. As my thank you for coming and watching the career talk today.
Yes, and thank you for coming, Jessica. It's always such a joy to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I love it every single time. I get to talk about my favorite topic, and you make it great, Andrew. So thank you.
Thank you, and so do you. In fact, Jessica was probably one of the first top voices I selected when I got here at LinkedIn. She's so great. But thank you to all of you for joining us. Like I said, if you found this helpful, if you were trying to figure out, hey, what to post, post this, repost it, tag us, let us know what your top 3 takeaways were. We love hearing about that. And obviously, take that survey and give us all of your feedback. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back after the new year with a new episode of Career Talks. And obviously, stay safe out there. It's a crazy world. New York City's out there behind me. I know that, obviously. But, take care of yourself. You can only be a good candidate. You can only get hired if you're safe and well enough to do so. So until next time, stay well and best of luck.